look at the solutions. Again, some of these problems regarding the tax system, informal taxation, and this overall impact in productive economy and the resources available to government is something government will need to actually reflect very well upon. Now, here's the danger. The danger is that the new coming government is going to inherit an existing system. And these guys that you talked about that you have to deal with will still continue to work and pay you those visits and you pay those informal taxes. Now, here we're going to talk about what is the right thing to do in order to fix our economy and grow government revenue. Now, I tell you what, The Economist, in one of their editions, when India, after the Indian election, did an analysis. I mean, the guy won huge, Narendra Modi, or what's his name. And then the thing is that similarity in terms of the kind of challenge we have in Nigeria, in terms of informal sector, formal sector, taxation issues, power issues, and land matters also. I mean, that doesn't have land, the issues you're having in terms of manufacturing. But the point now is that there must be reform of those systems and structures. Those regulatory agencies seem no longer regulating, they are regulating the businesses out of business. And so there must be a conscious effort on the part of government to reform those systems. And without doing that, you will not encourage business. And so the revenue base will not grow. And they talked about our tax ratio in terms of the volume of tax we pay. Now, we could actually reorganize this system in such a way that we can reduce taxes and then increase more businesses, because here is a competitive business environment. I read something from Ventures Africa just yesterday, and they said Kenya, Nairobi specifically, has the highest growth of FDI coming into Africa. Why? And then we just hope to go with a huge GDP, but then we don't have investments coming into the country because our investment climate is so dangerous and difficult. So if both the state and the federal government, and this must be a conscious effort, and I tell you, it's a very, very systemic problem that a government needs to deal with. And like you say, the APC government, unfortunately, is not a good time to go into government. But the only people that will make it impossible for them to relax like the previous government relaxed are Nigerians. We need to formalize the way we engage with them from all angles. Like FCCI, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, all of those business groups, and from the advocacy that people like Virgin and other CSOs do, holding government to account. Not just accounting for the resources we give them, but accounting for the way they manage things, especially the regulation. All the sectors are crying for reforms. Ms. Onodeko talked about the oil and gas sector. Huge challenge in that sector. I mean, if we start now, we probably will not need. And then we talk about manufacturing. So what kind of economy are we going to run? We need to take a decision on the kind of economy we're going to run.
Party government, and some people helped you by financing you to get into government. When you get there, you can't shut the door on them. You have to find a way to recoup what they spent. And we know who spent for this new government to get in. So I'm now getting a little bit jittery that how are they going to do and extract their payback? The first place most people are going to look at is the oil and gas industry. Give me an oil block, or let me be a supplier. 5-6 years ago, Nigeria used to operate a system called the open account system. That's how we used to import petroleum products into Nigeria. When they used up all the lines, and international banks stopped funding, and traders couldn't access funding for it, they moved to the swaps system, whereby we give you crude and you bring in product. The result of moving from one system to another has cost this government about $4.3 billion US, of which in the last 6 or 7 years, only half of it has been paid. I haven't seen any accounts that the government has shown so far that shows that there's an outstanding of $1.6 billion that has been outstanding for over 5 years. That's what the Buhari government is going to inherit. Other than that, we've now moved on to a system now where they're now looking at swaps and everybody's investigating it, and the 3 fantastic companies that benefit from it, all of a sudden they're going to be blacklisted. The next point is that as they get blacklisted, some people are going to try and get in there to continue. It's going to be under local content. That's what the minister told us when they appointed those 3 companies that benefited from it. That, oh, we don't want the international companies to be doing all the business. Let's point 3 Nigerian companies. They were all affiliated with one part of the country, a particular person in government, a particular party that was ruling. It's all the same thing. So if the beneficiaries of all these local content things are linked to political patronage, we haven't moved. So we have to scrutinize. We shouldn't just look on face value and say, oh, now Nigerians are the ones doing it. If they are doing it in a less efficient way, a more corrupt way, and a way that's not benefiting Nigerians, then there's no point in the fact that it's moved from the hands of a French person who was benefiting 5% now to a Nigerian who is benefiting 95%. So what are we going to do about it? Are we just happy to see, oh, we can't pray anymore. It's time for works. Faith without works doesn't work. My biggest point that I want people to take away with is that Nigeria is relying on a small pie, a small piece of cake. So there's a lot of scramble and a lot of desperation to get a crumb of it. If only we could sit back a little bit and grow that cake into a giant-sized cake, everybody will be able to go home with a slice. So I think we should start looking at reforms and regulations that are going to grow the pie, attract foreign direct investment, help businesses grow, and encourage everybody to wait a little while to benefit from what the gains are. Thank you.
Stopping the enemies of the transparency and the efficiency that we see in the economy. Is there anything we can build on that's already there that we can build on to be able to reduce their influence? Things that have already started that we need to work on just to improve and make more efficient.
Well, when I started talking, I talked about government, not just focusing on raising revenues, but reducing the inefficiencies in the system and putting in place incentives for people to do the right thing. And a key challenge, specifically for the incoming government, and one area through which they can even begin to deliver on some of their campaign promises will be the issue of the cost of governance. That's where the patronage system also comes in. The issue of the enemies who are benefiting from the inefficiencies and the corruption, standing in the way of real change. Now, if the government comes out, which I've stated it in a number of forums, that is going to focus on the cost of governance. Now, if you look at the Nigerian budget, and you look at how much Nigeria is spending on the wage bill, for the 2015 budget, the wage bill alone is going to be 41.2%. That means we are using more than 40%, close to half of the entire resources available just to pay salaries and allowances. Not even including the pensions and so on. And you know the kind of laws that are being passed at the state and federal level, well, mainly at the state levels for outgoing governors, outgoing speakers of House of Assembly, where they are going to receive salaries for life, where they are going to receive pensions. They are receiving salaries for life, they are going to receive pensions for life, and they are going to have what they call it, health benefits, certain amount allocated for treatment abroad for themselves and their families and other perks that they are coming around. So the key challenge for government will be to focus on the issue of the cost of government. It's extremely high currently. And one way of doing that is, like I mentioned, I mentioned the Treasury Single Account. It's very closely related to this is what we call the IPs, the Integrated Payroll and Personnel Information System. That is already on the ground. You talked about what is already on the ground. The problem is that it started way back in the early 2000s, from I think 2001 specifically. But up till this moment, we haven't been able to get everybody on board because some people are resisting. I gave it to the outgoing Minister of Finance. She did make effort, and on 2 different occasions there were ministerial directives for everybody to get on board. But it appears that along the line, they come against political pressure. One thing is to be a technocrat, wanting to do things the right way, but you have to contend with the political economy of change. That's what APC have to do. They have to contend with the political economy of change. They have the political will to actually drag the chain. I talked about the police, I talked about the military and the universities and so on. Now, we don't get on this automated system, even though they are paying the highest wage rate. Why? Is it because somebody doesn't want? I mean, I can tell you, with the little research I've seen, if the government, the incoming government, is able to achieve that, simply bringing everybody on board that act, the kind of money it's going to see will be shocking to Nigerians. You now discover that most of us who have been paid as salaries are actually non-existent people, because the way it functions now is more like, okay, the system works like this, both at the state, the local government and federal level is, if I am in a position where I have direct access to controlling what is paid out, somebody comes from the MDA and says, okay, let's work it out this way. I, as the head of my agency, I generate 200 boosts. That's what they call it. I generate 200 boosts. Now, it is your job to help facilitate, get those boosts on the payroll. And what happens? Your incentive is that out of those 200 boosts, you probably inherit 70, while I have 130. So those are some of those things that the government will still have to work on. I have the belief that if ongoing IPs reforms around trying to get everybody on board the IPs is successfully done, we're going to discover that, just like one of the speakers in the first panel said, we're talking about the current price of oil, but we've been working as if, because what has been going into the accounts has only been almost less than half of the actual price of oil. So if it's actually, the price of oil has actually dropped now, nothing has changed actually. If we make efficient use of that money coming, it will still be the same like when we had the boom when it was 115, 110 and thereabout. Nothing really has changed. So what I see the biggest challenge will be, what will make or mar the new administration will they have the political will to actually push and bring about the change they are talking about. And to do that, one of the first areas we have to focus on is the budget. The recurrent capital balance is unbelievable. For a country with the infrastructure deficit we have, I think it was Mr. Webb, the gentleman that started in the first panel, talking about the World Bank saying that the IMF, projecting that the infrastructure gap in Nigeria needs about over $350 billion to fill that gap. And that with the current rate of spending on capital investment in our budget, it will take more than 100 years to actually achieve it. The current 2015 budget, the capital total allocation to the capital end is less than about 15%. It's less than 15% of it, and that is allocation. We're not talking about actual. Now, Sheon did mention that even within the first 4 months of this year, in the budget, about 1.02 trillion is the fiscal deficit, meaning that we need to find the money somewhere. And out of it, the government have projected about 870 we borrowed from within Nigeria, domestic borrowing. Out of that 870, we've already borrowed like 470 within the first 3-4 months. And it's not to push it into capital investment, but to pay salaries and overheads. Tell me how the hospitals can, how can we build more hospitals? How can we deliver more services, to the people, which is actually why government is existing. So these are some of the challenges, and it will require political will, because the problems have been so institutionalized that it will be very difficult to change without stepping on toes.
I was talking about the survey of American last year. If you look at the estimates, the good schools of education is cultural transparency. And until we deal with it, we are not going anywhere. The light bulb will shine. What to do with corruption? Like kids have to go to school without having to carry them out, and we're sure what they're going to get. In fact, that study said that, confirmed that the willingness is so bad now that the willingness to give corruption is even stronger than the willingness to collect. That is the supply. The supply of corruption is way higher than the demand. Yes, we in the private sector, we are the ones that go to say, okay, we teach the guys in the public sector how to do. Last year, Nigeria lost over 400 billion naira on tax, on duty waiver.
duty waivers, and we are the ones that will go there, tell them what to do, how to do, how to do, how to do. So it's institutional, it is structural, but beyond that, it has gone to cultural.
But this session wanted to focus on generating the tax base, so growing the tax base. So are you saying that until we fight corruption, we cannot talk about taxes? We have the luxury of waiting for the corruption to be fixed, given the current economic situation of Nigeria.
There are quick wins. There are no hanging fruits. There are no hanging fruits. That doesn't require you to go through the House of Rep, the Senate, to get certain things done. Even in oil and gas industry, there are a lot of things the executives can do with simple political will.
And what exactly can they do to start those low-hanging fruit that need to be addressed, that will give the government more moral authority to ask for more taxes if that's what we still need after we've plugged those holes?
Some of those things that need to be done. The PIB, I don't see the current assembly, 58 or 7%, or 87%, or 48%. I don't see, of course, they promised after the election that they're going to pass it. Yeah, we don't see them passing that bill at the end of the day, but I think that bill will be covered. And certain things that doesn't really require the bill passed. I may not be able to pinpoint those to remember. Yes, to pinpoint that.
Okay, just to say a few quick things that the government can do to actually show that they're serious and to bring in revenue. First and foremost, every single oil contract that is done in Nigeria today goes through a middleman or a few middlemen. When the government says we're going to need 10 million liters of petrol in Nigeria, the government can go on a website, advertise it, have people post what they can offer and at what price, and through a tender system, buy the fuel. Alternatively, what Nigeria does is General XYZ goes to the president, somebody who supports the party goes to the president. It all goes through different companies. Local content again. That's what we call local content in Nigeria. So 3 or 4 people make a few $1 million in the process. That's money that comes to the government coffers that ends up in private pockets. I know people who joined the oil industry and within 2 years bought their first private jet from profits. And I'm sure this is not the entire profit they made. So the middleman business, if the government says from now on, no middleman gets anything. When government wants something, there's a website, you go there, go and check for what the government wants, and you post what you can do, and they pick the best person. 1, in terms of performance, you have to have a track record for performance. 2, you have the financial wherewithal to supply. And 3, the products you are bringing is going to be checked to make sure it meets specification. I'm sure if we did that across importation, first and foremost, what we're spending on importing products into Nigeria will go at least half the price. For one PFI, a pro forma invoice of kerosene, I'll explain just that one and then I'll let somebody else speak. Kerosene is valued at 40 naira 90 kobo per liter. The bribe that goes to the person who helps you get the pro forma invoice is 30 naira per liter. They claim that Nigeria is using 11,000 liters of kerosene daily. Multiply 30 times 11,000 liters every day. That's how much is paid in bribes to government officials. Not only that, when they now collect this at 70 naira whatever, they now sell it not to the kerosene purchasers. They sell it to the aviation industry as 80K, which because kerosene and jet fuel are almost the same specifications. They sell it to them at 175 naira per liter, what they bought at 70. So they make an additional profit of 100 naira per liter on 11,000 liters every day. Figure that out, and that's about $9-something billion on a monthly basis. That's the kind of money we're losing. So if the government is looking for revenue, cut out the middleman. They need to start doing probes. They need to start probing government officials. Every single house in Bodinong, all those skyscrapers that are empty, who owns it? Where did they borrow the money from? They should pick them to
1978, he just closed the business. So now this guy is hesitant to even open up to government. But if I know I can come and government says, you are informal sector, don't worry about the past, let's move forward. Declare what you have now, and on this basis, we can then talk about tax compliance. I think that will help.
Of tax amnesty. And so yes, so we'll just have Austin can address the contract issue, and I'll look for Vincent to address the listings, like the capacity of the capital market to help, and then we'll take a last question, then we really have to close.
All right, quickly on the contract. You know, Nigeria is one of the, first African countries to pass a procurement, public procurement act. That's the law governing procurement and including contracts. But that's one thing we've always been good at, passing the laws. But it hasn't improved the act of procurement up till this moment. From the last time the World Bank did the assessment of 2000 to this moment, we're still, by 2000 we're losing every 6 naira out of every 10 naira is lost to corruption in every transaction. But part of the biggest challenge has been that the Federal Executive Council up to this moment has constituted itself into a contract awarding bazaar. It's a weekly bazaar of awarding contracts. Instead of focusing on its duty as a policy-making arm of government, it has turned into, if you turn on ETA every Wednesday, what do you hear? The sums you hear about billions and trillions. But the procurement law actually provides for a public procurement council, a regulatory council. That has not been put in place. But good enough, this incoming administration has made a promise, a firm promise, which I think civil society here should hold the government, on it. That one of the first things they do within the first 100 days is to institute that public procurement council. It's very, very critical, so that the issue of contract awarding and approval is taken out of the Federal Executive Council, and the highly competent body, takes up that and be able to enforce the provisions of the procurement act, and then Federal Executive Council can now face its primary duty of policy making and monitoring government and expenditure. I think that's one way we can get out of that issue of corruption in the issue of contract very, very, very soon.
Yes, on the capital markets, I agree with you that the capital market is a great window to stimulate private capital towards providing some of this infrastructure and also expand the tax base. But unfortunately, Nigerian capital markets, especially the stock market, is a little bit shallow relative to the size of the economy. If I'm correct, we have less than 250 public companies at Nigerian Stock Exchange, about 202 or 202 in this case, which is very low. Most of the high-tech companies in the oil and gas, the telecom, they are not in the market, and government is trying to bring them into the market through some ways. And Lagos Chamber of Commerce will feel that they should be incentivized instead of being forced to come into the market. But thank God the Nigerian the pension, that is the contributory pension scheme, have done a great job. Of course, we have about 5 billion Nigerians contributing to that scheme over the last 10 years or so. About 5 trillion naira in that fund right now. A year ago, there was some reforms making it possible for about 20 to 25% of that fund to go into infrastructure project. But the people designing this infrastructure should also know that this one has some criteria. If the state government wants to tie a road, they want to borrow money through the capital market follows the money. They want to give money to where they think it should come out, So when you are designing some of these projects, you have to bear in mind that it has to be bankable. If it is not bankable, capital market cannot finance it. Even if you're not borrowing from bank, but you want to make sure that this project has the ability of paying back itself. Is very, very key. We've seen a lot of projects structured through this social welfare. It's all of us, it's for everybody. Capital market is difficult for in terms of the stock market, of course, a lot still need to be done. And we feel that as the transparency of the new government takes effect, the Pension Act have to be reviewed to make sure that at least 60 to 70% of that fund should be available to finance infrastructure.
I have a question here for Taiwo Idele about the potential of the religious industry to contribute to the tax base. So let's take that.
Okay, so I know this is controversial, but I'll tell you what the law says and my views. So this is about churches and mosques. So we know that, at least based on the information we read in the newspaper, that the single person that has the highest number of private jets in Nigeria today is a pastor. Now, Nigerians, because we're so religious, we don't like people to go there, so they don't just touch it. The law is actually very clear. The religion organization themselves are exempt from tax to the extent that the income they make is not from business or trading. The individuals who run those organizations by whatever names they are called, pastors, imams, overseers, have no exemptions in the law. And whatever income they earn, including benefits, so you can see you're not collecting salary, but you're living in the mission house provided by the church, that's liable to tax. You fly business class, first class with your kids to abroad, families to go and have vacation, that's taxable. And taxes must be collected. So that goes for all beliefs and religions, even though I said in the one forum, somebody said, how do you go and tax a babalawo? So, and the same thing goes for traditional rulers. They have no exemptions in the law, and taxes must be collected. For those organizations themselves, if they venture out of what they're supposed to do and they start trading and they start doing business, you have a property, you let it out, you say a church, you pay tax on it. So I think Nigerians must accept what is in the law. If they don't like it, let's go and change the law. We can't have the law say one thing and then what we do is completely different. When any political leader has the courage to say let's do the right thing, the message will then find everywhere, oh, because this guy is a Muslim, he's fighting Christians. So that level of education is necessary for us to move forward.
We have one last question from the MC. No, it was only the MC. It's not him.
So that you will not forfeit his rights because of
Sorry.
So my name is Stanley Acholi. My question is for Mr. Oyede. It's about state government. And you know Lagos is a very good example considering all of the resources that are being used to Lagos for the population and all of that. But there are 35 other states. And as our last said, 21 states are owing salaries. Kogi just slashed. Oyo State, Osun State is owing 6 months or thereabouts, and they are struggling because of reduced part allocation. But there are a lot of things that the state can do in terms of collecting revenues from internal, the IGR, the tax agencies are not optimal. What do you think that the state, we can't use Lagos as a model compared to say Imo State. So what can those other states, especially the rural-based states, what can they do to shore up their tax revenue? Because it's very difficult to go to the villages and ask those who to pay tax. So what do you think that those states can do to shore up their revenues so that they can meet this basic demand of paying salary without paying the
Okay, so that's a very good question. So we have a lot of states that are not viable in my view in Nigeria,
Yeah.
other than. So let's move forward and say how do we now deal with the problems? So it's because we rely so much on money coming from the center and it's not coming as it used to be, we're now struggling. What those states need to do, but by the way, even Lagos State is not anywhere close to where they should be. What every state in Nigeria needs to do is, first and foremost, you need to have a data. You need to have information about how many people do you have in your state. And this is not the population census that is done centrally, where you are very honest with yourself. Find out how many of those people are of tax-paying age and have any form of income. So once you have that data, it helps you to plan. You'll be amazed that even those people in villages are paying, in quotes, some taxes. They're just not formal and legal taxes. Such that what you then do is you translate that, first harmonize them. So if there are 10 taxes, I make it 1 or 2, and I legalize it. And introduce technology in the way you collect a lot of those taxes to minimize interaction with people who are corrupt and therefore create a lot of leakages. And you also find that even government agencies in those states, some of them, they have taxes deducted on their income, salaries, but they never remitted to tax authorities. And many of the states don't even have sufficient knowledge of what they're entitled to. What if I tell you today, for example, that VAT is not the revenue of federal government, it belongs to states. But guess what the law says? It says federal government will collect the VAT on behalf of the states and keep 15% as cost of collection in this time and age. The global benchmark for cost of collecting revenue is 1%. Federal government keeps 15%, shares the 85%, and the law is so defective in my view that it gives all the powers to the federal government to decide who pays tax, to grant waivers to who is importing, for something that is not their money. So if those states can just think about those things, first look inwards, reform your system, have information about who is supposed to pay tax, what taxes they need to pay, and then deal with the center as well. At the end of the day, it won't mean that all of them will be viable, but they'll be much better. It won't be 21 anymore, maybe it will be 2 or 3.
Thank you so much, everyone. At this